Hey, Garrett. Good evening.
Mind everyone to turn off your phones, put airplane mode or something like that, because otherwise I have to throw you out of that. Okay. Or we could all say, answer, we all like to hear. I think it's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, it's one of those,
Oh, is that?
it's changed. We was an hour off earlier because it's Fox listened to me talking about. So.
Yeah.
There's that phone frequency FM.
Oh, okay.
Frequency that pays for.
Well, my husband has a clock that still, it switches, but it doesn't switch for another week. So for a whole week, he's going, well, why am I getting up so early? But then he decides to change it. He didn't. Why are they up so late?
Yeah.
It's just.
Emerson, what was the, I don't have a copy of the minutes here, but what was that change?
Page 4, bottom line, so Governor Kodak, Kodak.
Thank you.
I don't know, maybe change that, I didn't want to send me the copy.
No, and she wouldn't have sent me one now, but she would have probably noted it when it's been changed. If you sent it to her.
No, it was never written.
Oh,
It was
okay.
never written before I.
Yeah, but Dawn decided to cancel. Oh, no, it's fine, bro. Hello, Gary. Do you have any other joiners? Okay. Is he going to Steve?
Garrett?
No, Steve House.
Yeah, with 3J, I think he's gonna help Garrett for some other things, so.
Are we ready to go, Mr.? Are you ready? Okay. We're ready to go? 6 o'clock? Ooh. 6 o'clock, I call to order the Gearhart Planning Commission on March 13th at 6 P.M. We have a consent agenda with the minutes from January 9th, the financial report from the 26th. And we do not have any other correspondence that I knew of our issue tonight. There's been one correcting spelling of our governor from, just, sometimes that happens. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? Moved. All right, John's moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Emerson, right? I'm sorry. I've been having that. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, moving on, staff reports. Chad, do you have something to report to us?
No, not too much today. I'm gonna keep it short because I'm not sure how long that we're gonna have with these presentations tonight. An item of note, we've had 2 bonds for the water treatment facility. We just made our final payment on one of those bonds, which should reflect in your taxes here upcoming and save you about 50 cents per thousand. Is where that is. The next bond will fall off here in about 4 years. And then that would be all the bonds that Gearhart has, and you'd be left only with your $1.50 cents per thousand with the Gearhart general fund for taxes. So things are going pretty smoothly there. The city council has met and chosen in regards to the public safety building 2 scenarios that the community helped the committees design. And so the 2 scenarios are both here at the current location for the public safety building, fire station, police station. One of them has, keeps this building here in this location, and we would just do a little bit of remodeling during the construction process, and one of the choices will be replacing this building as well to build the new fire station. So currently, the architects are costing out everything, putting some numbers, and this will be presented in the May town hall for the public, and then from there.
The numbers will be presented?
Yep, and what the cost of the project would be. And it's gonna be, it's a tough location. A lot of geotech work had to be done to figure out how a foundation would work for critical infrastructure, and I'm sure that's gonna be fairly expensive to build anywhere in your heart. It's going to be fairly expensive in regards to foundations for critical infrastructure, but so that's going well. Other than that, nothing major to report.
For the recording, I forgot to mention that all commissioners are present, and Chad and Garrett for the staff. And Angelina is not here tonight, and Pete is not attending tonight. Garrett, do you have anything to report other than your report tonight?
Sure. So just an update on implementing FEMA's pre-implementation compliance measures. We've postponed having a planning commission hearing on that until May is our plan. And then we would be able to have a city council hearing and adoption by FEMA's July 31st deadline. And that'll just give us more time to see if FEMA provides any additional guidance before the deadline, or if any changes to the program come up. We have a presentation tonight from 3J Consulting on the work they've been doing for the city of Gearhart to update the buildable lands inventory and create a housing needs analysis and infrastructure needs analysis. And this is work that's been taking place in each of the cities within Clatsop County, and 3J has been working with each of them. And so we're looking forward to hearing those initial results. And then just a note on the Planning Commission goals list. You all facilitate your own discussions, but I just wanted to let you know that if you want to work on the goals list in a way where we more systematically document the purpose of each goal or some background information on each one, and perhaps identify a few that would be a higher priority than others, with some kind of a timeline for when you'd like to address them. I'm happy to work on that with you, and do homework on that as well. So looking forward to that discussion. That's all I have for right now.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, commissioners, do you have anything to report? No. I'd like to thank Garrett for your abbreviation page in last month's package, so now I know what all those funny abbreviations stand for. It was in the package, and so I appreciate that. Okay, moving on. Goals list. One of the things we had was to evaluate the goals. Garrett has brought up something. I'm going to jump right in and say what's on my mind. And I'll let everyone else talk. I'm going to say what's on my mind. I have looked at this goals list for over 10 years. It is, I want to use the word stale. So many of the things are dead, and it sounds horrible, but the elk are dead. And there are other things that have to do with micromanaging staff. There are other things that we have no control over. They're not even a planning commission issue. I have thought about this. Chad and I have talked some. I think that a better approach would be to throw out the goals list. If Garrett has something he wants us to work on, if the city council wants us to work on something, if one of you, and I've sat on other planning commissions where someone has had a burning issue they want us to work on, or if Tom Jones or whatever in the community says, I have this concern, can you work on, that we take those as they come up. And that is my suggestion. Yes, John.
1000% agree with everything you just said. I think that's exactly the way we should approach it, and I think we should start from scratch.
Anyone else? Do I need to have a motion, Chad?
A consensus.
A consensus. Can you show by nodding your head consensus?
Yeah.
You're thinking you really like it, don't you?
No, I don't like it, but I made a lot of notes, but no, I think this is exactly as stated.
Then we can move ahead with that, and the idea is, means that we're not doing anything, because we have today an issue, we've got another thing coming in April, we've got another thing in May. We always have things that we are working on, so I thank you all. We have now just, oh, yes,
Oh, I'm sorry, that's not, Commissioner Frank. Raise your hand.
I agree with John and his agreement with Jenny.
we had a nodding
Nodding.
consensus.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a consensus. So, Chad, if you can in some way relate that on to the city council, that we would like to work with that way going forward. That when they have something they would like us to work on, that we can get together, have a work session, or they can communicate to us, or whatever. That would be very helpful. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Visitors' comments. Do I have any comments from visitors that are not related to, tonight's agenda? Is there anything you've got, Sharon? No. All right. Then we will move ahead with the public hearing. I'll wait till Chad comes back. Oh, yes, get our comment sheet.
Do we need to review the budget financial report?
You accepted that during the consent agenda. Did you have, Eric, did you have a specific question?
Well, it was a topic that came up before, just thought I'd make sure I understand it.
That's to do with the financial.
Under subcategory 17 planning
Yes.
and under materials and services.
Yes.
And 10-1740 purchase services. So this has come up before, and you've been told everything's okay, but we're over budget there. You're estimating, but as a category, subcategory as a whole is under budget. Do we just move the money around and we take
Yes.
some funds that aren't being expended and they go to that line item? Is that how it works?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we know that we under budget for Garrett because we did not know all the things were going to come up this year, specifically with FEMA. That we spent a lot of time.
Sure,
So yes, otherwise, we're under budget,
right.
so it's,
A line item by itself doesn't matter relative to the whole category.
yes.
That's fine, I just want.
Okay, excellent question. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, file 25-02 CU, conditional use request for property located at 95A South Cottage Avenue, further described as assessor's plot 61010BB05600. The request is to establish a variety store used in the neighborhood commercial C1 zone. I need to read a disclosure statement. All persons testifying shall be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact, or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing and opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the city council or land use board of appeals or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the planning commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence, arguments, or testimony that was within the scope of the hearing. The hearings body shall grant a request for scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence, argument, or testimony pursuant to ORS 197.7636A through E. I need to ask the commissioners if they need to declare a conflict of interest, an ex parte contact, or personal bias. Is there any?
I have been to the store.
You've been to the store.
I've been to the store.
I visited the location. Did any of the rest of you visit
And I
the
was
location?
present when Tom was describing the extent of the ice cream shop, the proposed ice cream shop to my wife, and it's consistent with what has been attached to the application, so no, I don't believe in that.
Okay, so when we get there and we're discussing it, if you have anything additional to tell us that you might have learned, please let us know, okay? Okay, so Don, you didn't pass it or you know, it, or?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so we've all basically essentially seen it, right? Okay, I need to ask the audience, are there any challenges to the commission's ability to make an impartial decision? Hearing none. Staff report, Garrett?
All right, thank you. I'm gonna try to keep this one a little bit more brief than I otherwise would, since we have a guest presentation, but happy to follow up with more perspective on any issues you want to discuss. So this proposal, we'll start by just covering a few relevant facts as I understand them. The proposal is for a variety store, sweet shop, ice cream shop. They're not proposing to expand the footprint of the existing building or to change the circulation of the site by putting a different primary entryway in a different part of the building than it currently is or anything like that. There is in practice some street parking that people use nosing in from both Cottage Avenue and A Street. And parking is not required in the C1 zone in any case. The applicant hasn't proposed any specific use of the outdoor area for seating, but that's something that you might want to inquire about. And the applicant hasn't proposed any specific operating hours in their application, but that's something that you also have asked other applicants about in the past and might want to do that. So moving on to the criteria, the decision criteria. Zoning ordinance section 8.040, the findings or draft findings for you to consider here are on the third page of the staff report. Sorry, I'm realizing we didn't have page numbers on this, but section 8.040. Staff found that the proposal is consistent with comprehensive plan policies. There's some discussion here of the business's orientation to tourists versus locals. And it seems that there is some indication from written testimony that there is some demand and value for this thing amongst locals, for what it's worth. The second criteria, that a demand exists for the proposed use. Again, there's no evidence that there's not a demand for it, and the proposal appears to be consistent with that criteria. The location, size, design, and operating characteristics of the proposed use will have a minimum impact on surrounding properties. Staff didn't identify any impacts that we're concerned about, and we didn't get notified of any potential impacts in testimony. Operating hours is related to this criteria if you want to discuss it. The variety store wouldn't be expected to generate outsized amounts of traffic compared to prior uses. So there's been a bit of a hodgepodge of uses there recently. I think including an apothecary, veterinary pharmacy, maybe a barber shop, and some professional office space possibly. But we're not concerned, staff isn't concerned about traffic generation from the proposal. And we didn't receive any comments from other staff about concerns with public utilities, police, fire services. The site's already developed, so the criteria regarding physical characteristics, topography, and their suitability for the proposed use is not a concern either. And so the proposal seems to meet all of the approval criteria. Zoning ordinance section 7.060 provides some guidance on potential conditions of approval. And there aren't any recommended conditions that come out of this section in the staff report. So the recommended conditions that we have are, the first one's pretty typical for conditional uses. It's more like a notice to all conditional use applicants that conditional use approvals are specific to the proposal that the Planning Commission considers, and expansions of the use or like physically expansions of the building or like changing the use of the site would require an additional conditional use approval. We noted that the existing parking occupies portions of the city right of way, and we have a condition just noting that this conditional use approval isn't like a license or permit to exclusively use the right of way for the business's parking. And then our final standard condition that the approval is void after 1 year if it's not exercised. So in summary, staff do not have concerns about the proposal. We received, I think I've counted 12 pieces of written testimony, all of which were in support and didn't include any new facts relevant to the approval criteria, but they were all in support. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Jennifer.
Everything I've read about the application is that the shop will be selling sweets and ice cream. And I wanted to know, for a variety store, food sales have to be not the main business. Our zoning requires that it not be the primary business to be selling food items. And I didn't know if the store was going to be selling other than food items, or whether this is actually would need to be zoned as a neighborhood cafe instead of a varieties.
We're all pulling out of books.
That's a really great question.
I would actually defer to the applicant to just clarify for us in their testimony and verify what they're proposing to sell, and then I can address for you whether this really should be classified as a variety store or something else, if that's all right.
Yes, yeah.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Any other questions for Gary? Okay, I've lost my agenda, here it is. All right, moving on, applicants report. Now it is time for you to please stand, that would help. Please state your full name, your address. That's all we need, isn't it? Okay, so it is your turn.
I'm Tom and Megan Atkins. We live on 749 8th Street, right here in Earhart. We're permanent residents and homeowners here.
Okay.
Let's
No,
not
you may
close
sit.
that.
Okay.
I feel like going to go. We've been here, this is our 4th year that we've been in Gearhart year round. And our son graduated Seaside High School. Tom is the manager of the market here. So with the business proposal, what we really wanted to do was to create an environment that is family friendly, that we've heard throughout our time here that people have missed from previous sweet shops. The ice cream really rolled into that because everybody wanted ice cream and once, especially in the summer months, I mean, maybe not so much during storms and things. And then when we started this process, I actually came in and spoke with Chad and Angelina and just really spoke about what use could the store be, like what would that fall under? And that's a great question that you had about whether it be a cafe or a like a variety store. But the actual part of the store, even though it's food items, with the way that we read the actual variety store zoning, as it were, you know, the chocolates, like the gourmet chocolates, the candies, it's like the old-fashioned jarred candies that we're going to be weighing out. The apothecary have a lot of support for their licorice business, which people miss, I hear. So
Yeah.
we're going to continue that. So, and then more like giftable chocolates and candies,
Branded package.
very elevated, you know, like not a, as I would say, a junky candy store, you know, it's just like a very kind of like an elevated nostalgia is the sort of term that I've been using, so that it's welcoming, it's family friendly. You can, you know, get your nice packaged chocolates around the holidays as giftable items. There'll be a few like tote bags and things like that, but nothing too crazy from that retail aspect. So we'll go with your guidance for what zoning you feel that this falls under, but you know, a good portion of the store will be a retail environment selling those items. We're going to be quite set on our vision. I see a lot of people, I've worked in sales and retail pretty much my whole career, but I see a lot of people get a little excited when they go into places and they see, you know, once they get their wholesale license and they buy a lot of things that are kind of like not part of their brand vision. So we want to stick with, well, it's a small space as well. So we have to be quite mindful of what we're bringing in. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it, so much the whole concept is really going back to my childhood, growing up in England in a little village. I would like run to the store and get my little bag of candy. And, you know, it's like my little bit of independence as a child. And then with our own children, you know, we would take them to the coast and they would get ice cream in the evening after dinner, and it was kind of like our family tradition. And these are the memories, I mean, they're both now in college, so these are the memories that they have. So it's really creating that space that is, you know, like a family, grandparents, grandkids, parents, kids, locals, just to be able to walk and create that experience of coming in and then welcome in warm.
Multi-generational
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
And
Let me check my notes.
there were two questions there.
Yes.
The time
Yes.
and outdoor eating.
Yes, so the space is leased, and Linda Shook, who is the owner of the property, she has given us approval to be able to utilize that garden area, the grass area outside, from her behalf. What we would love to do is be able to put a few benches out there, maybe a couple of little picnic tables similar to what they have at the park area, so very much in keeping with what is already existing here in Gearhart. just more so that when people come in, if they're purchasing like an ice cream, they can then sit outside and enjoy that with, you know, the kids or whatever, and then, you know, ride their bags back home and things. So that's one area. We're not looking to like expand the actual footprint of the building or to build a patio or anything like that. It would be utilizing the existing space.
And there would be no service outside.
Yeah.
We would not, and it would be merely a place for
Yeah.
town folk to sit.
And then the hours, we are planning to be open year round. The summer hours, we would like to have extended hours into the evening, like probably around 8 o'clock would be when we would be looking to close. It gets dark 9:30, but we want to be mindful also of nearby homes. And then in the winter hours, it would be looking to close before it gets dark, like 4:30. And then in the mornings, be open 10 or 11 o'clock in the mornings.
Do any of the commissioners have questions? Not at this time, okay.
I know.
Oh, you do, I'm sorry,
I
Eric.
was waiting for others.
Go ahead, Eric.
The first question, just to clarify, I think with Garrett, on your report on page 2, it describes the property located at the southwest corner. Do we have to correct that for the record? Aren't we talking about the northeast corner of Cottage and A Street?
Yes, I apologize for that. We'll correct that in the decision record.
So, yeah.
Well, the northeast corner
Okay.
of A and Cottage.
Yeah.
Correct. That's the way I would see it.
Yes, is the.
So I just want to make sure that the report
No,
was
he
correct.
needs to have that correct.
Yeah.
And then similarly, from his, I'm Peter should ask these questions when Peter gives the report, but on page 3, where it does describe variety stores and limited food sales, which Jennifer just brought up, it says outdoor on-site seating is unlimited. And is that correct? Are we talking about the yard behind the building and that is unlimited? Or did we mean to say outdoor on-site seating is limited?
No, on variety stores, it says outdoor on-site seating is unlimited. That is in our.
Oh, that's in that.
It's in.
What does that mean?
It means that they have the space for it.
Oh,
We don't have any restrictions, but
Okay,
when we did it,
okay.
it was, some people were looking like putting seating on the sidewalk.
Mhm.
So when we did the ordinance, we wanted to restrict seating on the sidewalk. But there's other limits, you know, that fall in place, but not for this purpose.
Okay. And is it the lawn behind the building that you propose? You could
Kind of
put
to
that
the
as-
side, so.
To the side and
Yeah.
working your way
Right,
towards the
in this
back.
picture, it's all this green space here.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all attached to your
Yeah,
property.
yeah.
That's all part of the
Yeah.
Correct.
buildings. I got you.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I just want to clarify those things. Clearly, the community has spoken and we want ice cream. So, I don't have any other questions. The clarifying this whole variety store issue, I think we need to do that.
We'll talk about that because I think that.
But otherwise, I'm, it's like everybody else in full support and I appreciate that you guys want to do this.
Thank you so
Because
much.
I thought we needed an ice cream store here myself.
He's starving. Do we have, does any other commissioners?
another question.
Yes, Emerson.
Looking at the drawing on the back of your application, show that the first floor, where it's over 1,300 24. But that's the whole
The whole building,
building.
yes.
The time you put counter space, refrigerators, it's gonna be significantly less than that. And the reason I'm asking is because neighborhood cafe is something eat for inside seating.
Mhm.
So, assuming you've put in all the equipment you need, is it likely that it would be under 1,300 square feet or at least no more than 1,300 square feet?
It's not 1,300 square feet, the actual space that we have. From the drawing here, we have the hair salon on this side, and then the little barber shop here, and then we're here.
So
I
significantly.
think it's like 650 square feet that we have in total of
Yeah.
indoor space. We're not really looking to have indoor seating, because there just isn't space. So that's why we would, people would come outside and sit on a bench outside in the garden area, would be the ideal scenario.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on, you can just stay where you are. Do we have no one as proponents signed in? Do you have anyone on your screen, Chad, that wanted to give testimony? No. Do you have anyone that is opposed? Do you have anyone that's neutral? All right. So next we would have applicants rebuttal, but there is nothing for rebuttal. So I will close the public hearing at this point. Our first question is, Garrett, is this a variety store or is this a neighborhood cafe?
In my mind, it is a variety store. In that, they're not preparing food in a kitchen. And if it shares characteristics with any other listed use, I actually think it would be a neighborhood grocery market, which is permitted as of right, in that they'd be selling other food and household items potentially that are packaged and prepared somewhere else. But yeah, it has some characteristics of a variety store. I think that moving ahead with permitting it as that is fine, unless the applicant thinks that someday they might like to start doing more things that a cafe does, and they want the flexibility and they want to ask you for that kind of approval.
All right, so we have clarification on what our planning director says. So moving on from there, then, so be it a variety store, okay? It is time for our discussion.
Hi. Yes, thank you. Garrett, just to go back to your point, you just said that it could be a variety store or a neighborhood cafe, which is a conditional use, but a neighborhood grocery is an allowed use? Outright?
Yes. Neighborhood grocery market is listed under section 3.420, outright use is permitted.
So if this proposal would fit into a neighborhood grocery store, what would that do for this application?
If you all, again, this is a code interpretations like this are your purview rather than ours when we're in a hearing, but it would make the application unnecessary if you made that interpretation. And then when they came in to get an occupancy permit, like a building permit, if they were remodeling, or their business license, we would note that you made that interpretation, and they get whatever permits and approvals they need without it being a conditional use permit. But yeah, so that's what it would do.
Would that designation have any impact on the fee for this application?
I would have to discuss that with Angelina and Chad, and probably go back to what conversations they initially had with the applicant before I received the conditional use application.
I think, you know, as a small business owner who has occupied that exact space. Yeah. And we
I
created,
just figured this out.
we created a lot more ruckus than what's going to be happening here, but I mean, I encourage a good ruckus, just for the record. You know, a small business to have, you know, I think what we're all gonna say is this is obviously a want and a need in this town that's historically had candy and ice cream. And through the testimony from the citizens, obviously all in wanting that. You know, and another nice feature of this is 95 South Cottage is not right in on the main drag, so it actually can kind of draw a little bit of people, you know, just onto Cottage, which, you know, just kind of expands our downtown, which we discussed, wanting to be more business friendly and that kind of stuff. So my point is that as a small business having to pay fees for use, which may be outright, is something that I would question. So apparently Garrett is saying that is a decision that we get to make. And I think.
Well, I don't think he said that we get to make a decision on the fees. We get to make a decision on the interpretation.
Yeah, we don't make a decision on the fees.
Okay, but if, I think that would just open up, and I'm not trying to take anything away from necessarily the city or whatever, but I am empathetic to small business owners and this climate. Gerhard is, you know, it's not the easiest place to do business, you know, especially with the winter and all that kind of stuff. So besides that, it's to me, this is an obvious approval from where I sit. So that's all I have to say.
To read the definition, neighborhood grocery market. Modern community market or co-op, which sells food and sundries, including produce, meats, and seafood, beer and wine, personal and household items, and other grocery items. May also include deli, soups, salad bar, bakery, ice cream shop, and made-to-order meals and beverages to go. May offer beer growlers to go, wine tasting, and limited on-premise beer and wine consumption. Where appropriate, subject to OLCC licensing, indoor seating limited to 700 square feet. Outdoor on-site seating is unlimited. They have to meet ADA requirements. They have to do that in every one. So that's what, in case some of you didn't have that part right in front of you, that's what it says. You know, a neighborhood cafe is more for food that is prepared and consumed there. And then variety store is retail store, gift shop selling a variety of household, including home and garden items, antiques, and personal use items, including apparel. So and hybrid, I know hybrid. We don't have hybrid. Yes, John.
I think to Jennifer's point, if indeed, and I should have reviewed this thoroughly as she did, the zoning code. If it does say that there is a limit as to the percentage of food that can be sold, we probably should update that to indicate that we meant prepared food versus packaged food. Because that would eliminate, it would, you know, reduce this confusion. I don't think, you know, it's probably not healthy for us to have a clause in there which we're clearly going against, because 99% of what they're selling is food. Question is, what was the intent of that language? And it sounds like it meant prepared food, or, you know, some other category we could come up with, but at a future date, we might want to revisit that and get that clarified.
Because it does say limited food sales allowed for takeout as long as it's not the primary business, including coffee, tea, baked goods, made off premises, ice cream and similar items. You're not gonna be making the ice cream,
No.
there, right?
No.
And you're not gonna be making the chocolates.
No,
You're not gonna be making anything there except for getting money. Okay. Hey.
And then so with reading this, how I maybe interpreted it was the food items were like a prepared hot foods, like having a sandwich and things like that,
Yes.
which we're not doing. And then for me, the candy aspect is a retail item, even though it's a consumable item, so we're flexible.
We're open
However
to
you wanna
your
say it,
interpretation.
But we're not looking to do indoor seating, the space is not big enough.
We will not be
Alright.
preparing food on site.
And you don't know until you get started, what percentage of your business sales will be the ice cream?
And of course, it'll
And-
fluctuate throughout the
And
year.
and what percentage of your sales will be your packaged candies or any other goods that you might be selling in there? And that's, you know, so, Eric, do you have any comments?
I should have just said if we're going around, I'm fully supportive of this,
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, just to examine this element more specifically. It almost seems from this definition, food sales, and they list ice cream. I wouldn't categorize the other things they're selling, so to speak, as food. Piece of licorice is a piece of retail. They're gonna eat it, but it's not quite food. Similarly for the chocolates, and not to mention all the packaged stuff that's gifted. So I guess the question is ice cream gonna make up more than 50% of their sales? Of the rest of the stuff, I think it's gonna be in that category. And one day it might be, and another day it might not be, and at the end of the year, who knows? I don't, it doesn't fall, you know, since this doesn't quite match this definition, it doesn't quite match the grocery definition either. You're already have a hybrid or some other definition. You know, is there any benefit to them, the way Don was describing, cost wise perhaps, that they get outright use, and not have to worry about anything that they do, versus conditional use that may have some limitations? Are there any pros and cons to benefit them or the city, I guess? I'm not sure the answer to that. I'm just kind of.
Yeah, we're kind of looking, you know, we want to give them the best thing for you.
Right.
And we still have to look at best thing for the city, because where you may know where you're going, we understand where you're going. We always, as a planning commission, you have to look forward.
Understood.
And what someone else will say, well, you let them do such and such. So
Absolutely.
we always have to be forward thinking. We'll go back to, I can tell Garrett's thinking, can't you tell?
Yeah, can I offer something?
Yes,
So
please.
I think, yeah, when I suggested that it has some characteristics of a neighborhood grocery market, I meant just that. Not that I would outright classify it that way. You know, I think when, you know, in the city of Gearhart, I would say relative to some other places, there is a higher value placed on bringing questions like this to the planning commission. And we would, and it's, you know, it's a code use interpretation, and there's a fee for that too. I think it's reasonable for us to note in a record of decision that you approved a variety store conditional use, that the use shares characteristics with a neighborhood grocery market, and that to the extent that they want to do more of that kind of thing, it's not limited by the conditional use permit. But I don't want to overthink it too much. Like it's just kind of a bit of both, and it's common when there's an interpretation like that to have a planning commission decision where fees are charged accordingly anyway. So I think it's reasonable to approve a conditional use for a variety store.
All right, thank you. I think that's,
Yeah, to finish my comments,
Yes.
I would support it as it is.
okay. Jennifer?
I support it too, I just needed clarity about
Right.
what exactly was happening here, and if it's somewhere down the line, something came up that would actually be a problem for your business if
Thank you.
it was miscategorized.
Yes, thank you.
I'm in favor of it, I know the community's in favor of it, and as long as we know that we're doing our duty and our responsibility and it's documented correctly, I am in agreement.
Thank you.
Emerson?
Well, I'm in favor of it also. I do have some questions about the wording in the variety store that says primary items can't be food. This came up a little bit with Linda Goldfarb's expansion.
Yes.
And one of the problems could be, how are you defining what is the 50%? Is it 50% of volume or is it 50% of money? If Linda Goldfarb sells a couch, she's gonna extremely outweigh her coffee sales. Probably not on the number of customers that go in and buy that. So I'm a little worried about that. And I actually don't see what the problem would be if a variety store sold more food than it did other non-food items.
And that's why I was suggesting we might want to revisit the actual codes.
I can only speak for spending hours on that. It was, part of it was reaction to what had gone on and not permits taken and things not being done. Of course, the thing with these kind of ordinances is we can change them. And you do what you think is best at that moment. And it's, you know, then we can change it, hey, Russ.
I'm in favor of the variety store, whatever we call it. And, you know, I don't think I don't know that we've ever gone back and audited anybody with any business in this town in the last 10 years and said, hey, show us 50, 51, 49, you know. Giddy up.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, so we've gone around, we've discussed it. Don't think we have anything more to say. We've got plenty of people saying, yeah, we need ice cream. We are starving to death. Don't we can't because we're low blood sugar or something. I don't know what.
I'm sugar free as well.
I'm thinking that the variety store is what was applied for, and we will leave it that. We can always look at it down the road. So what I need to look at is someone ready to make a motion?
I move that we accept, it.
Eric?
I move that we accept this application for this conditional use.
Okay, with the conditions
Recommended.
With the recommended conditions in the planner's report.
Okay, thank you. Eric has moved that we move ahead with approval for this application with the the staff recommended conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Jennifer. Is there any further discussion? There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Excellent. We have a unanimous decision. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
When do you hope to open?
This is the first hurdle.
He's hungry right now.
Hopefully soon.
Okay, moving ahead with our agenda, you may leave.
Thank you all.
If you would like to do this, you can leave it, you won't get this all, sorry.
We will make your heart proud.
We're just gonna start.
Thank you for your support.
Sample, there is.
Yes.
You got it.
Can we ask for samples?
We'll have to talk to the attorney about that.
You didn't hear, I didn't say that.
This is
Never
for
thought.
12 ice cream.
Okay, moving ahead, we have no unfinished business. We have new business, information discussion about the draft housing needs analysis done by 3J. You all have documentation that we were given. Garrett, are you going to be handling this?
Sure. Well, I'll introduce Steve from 3J Consulting. So 3J Consulting are reputable experts that do this kind of work throughout the state of Oregon, and they have strong relationships and a history doing this kind of work. And all of the other cities in Clatsop County are working with them at the same time as we are to try to characterize our housing needs, buildable lands, and infrastructure needs. And just as you're listening to Steve, just consider that it's sort of a long pathway, but to get from the beginning of this process to where the rubber meets the road, but the results essentially determine whether and how much additional housing of different types we can justify if we're making rezoning decisions or considering a UGB amendment. And the results can also be used to advocate for ourselves in terms of infrastructure needs at the state level. And they speak to this issue that we have in Clatsop County of a lack of housing availability for workers and other people of all incomes. But I'm going to let Steve speak to it a little bit more and go through his findings, and look forward to hearing them and discussing with you tonight, and we can follow up and discuss at the next meeting as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Garrett, and thank you, commissioners. As Garrett said, my name is Steve Faust. I am the Community Planning Director at 3J Consulting, and I'm going to pull up a presentation here. And
If you could just wait a minute, we're going to try to get you on the big screen. Okay, we're getting you there.
okay, I will pause.
You're just a little box right now. Okay.
You don't need to see me. You want to see the presentation.
No, we just got it. Okay, are you ready, Chad?
I am.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your time this evening. I'll just kind of go over some of the points that Garrett had mentioned. So the work that we're doing for Clackamas County, and Alyssa Gertler had a conflict, but she might be joining us before we're done here this evening. Alyssa Gertler from Clackamas County, or Clatsop County, excuse me. We're building on the 2019 Clatsop County Housing Strategies Report that some of the strategies called for more current and accurate information regarding land and infrastructure in Clatsop County. So the county applied for and received a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And the purpose of this grant is to recognize the regional interconnections across the different jurisdictions throughout the county and the connection between housing and the economic health of Clackamas County. The outcomes for this project are more detailed information to help the cities and the county identify more appropriate solutions around housing. So there's 3 project elements here that we have prepared drafts of, and we're sharing those draft. We shared those draft products with you, and that's what I'll be presenting on tonight. The first is a buildable land inventory that looks at the supply of land that the city has for residential development. The second is an assessment of infrastructure needs and looking at potential improvements that could aid or unlock additional land for housing. And finally, an inventory of the current housing supply and some information about need as well. And feel free to stop me at any point. Let's see here, I lost my control. There we go. Just a quick review. We actually started this work about a year ago. We've been meeting with the task force. We've met with them 3 times now. At the beginning, we spent a lot of time collecting all the right information from the different jurisdictions, collecting census data, collecting data from the county. Then we drafted these inventories between August and January, and that included meetings with the city staff to go over some of the preliminary information and try to make sure that the data we were pulling together made sense in terms of folks who know the situation on the ground in each community. We met with the task force a 3rd time recently to go over some high-level observations about the data, what the data says for the county overall. And now we're doing these presentations. We've presented to Astoria and Cannon Beach. You're the 3rd presentation with more specific information about Gearhart. And we hope to take information both that we hear from you this evening and from potentially follow-up meetings with staff to make sure that the final reports contain the information that is beneficial to you as you continue these conversations about housing. So I'm going to start with the buildable lands inventory. Again, buildable land inventory determines the amount of developable land available for future housing within the urban growth boundary. For those who are not familiar, we essentially use GIS software. We start with our land supply. We then subtract different constraints, things like open water, the 100-year floodplain, steep slopes, and in some cases, wetlands. We also remove unsuitable lands. That could be public right-of-way, public parks, historic sites, smaller sites that are built out, and also sites that maybe do not have services available to them. And the result is our buildable land inventory. So some of this will probably sound very familiar to you. Gerhardt is located on mostly flat land, especially relative to the other communities in Clatsop County, with some potential for expansion to the north. Primary constraints include the 100-year floodplain and tsunami inundation zone and locally significant wetlands. We also noted that the North Coast Land Conservancy has easements on some lands in the Gerhardt urban growth boundary and really throughout Clatsop County. So when we first take a look at the total the gross number of vacant acres, so either parcels, I believe 3,000 square feet or greater that are completely vacant, or we also have a category called partially vacant. Those are parcels that have a single family home but are larger than 1/2 acre. We have a total of about 130 acres of vacant land when you add up these two the first two columns there. And that's what this looks like. The dark green are vacant parcels. The purple are parcels that are partially vacant. But again, that's gross acres. We know that that does not paint an accurate picture. So then we remove constrained acres from the inventory. This is overall acres, so 956 acres in the city, about 297 acres or 31% of those acres are constrained. And here's what those constraints look like. The red is our slopes of 25% or greater. Within the city, there's limited areas of those slopes, looks kind of like bluffs. The significant color, dominant color that you see there is the purple for the 100-year floodplain. And then the dark green also shows wetlands throughout the city. And when we remove those constraints from the vacant and partially vacant land, we end up with a total buildable number of about 91 to 92 acres, which still seems like quite a bit. That's what this looks like on this slide right here. Again, the green being vacant buildable land, and the purple being partially vacant buildable land. I think it's really important to note that 133 of the 166 buildable lots are less than 1 acre in size. So while the state regulations of how to prepare a buildable land inventory require us to include all these kind of disparate smaller parcels, it just may seem in aggregate like there's a lot of land, but the feasibility of 133 small, lots of less than 1 acre, each developing a single family home to impact the housing stock is not very feasible. There are only
Steve?
Yes, go right ahead.
I'd like to ask a question. The northwest corner on your map, you've got a dotted line there. Is that indicating that corner is not within the urban growth boundary?
That's a great question. That looks like what that indicates. You can tell me if that's wrong, or maybe Garrett.
I live in that area, and last I checked, I'm within the city of Gerhardt.
Ginny?
Okay.
Yeah, the dotted line below here says city limits.
Right,
Brown line is urban growth boundary.
right, but I'm in the city limits.
Yeah.
I'm up in that corner.
I think
Oh, you are.
it.
There's 100, no, it's right there. I live right here.
That's the golf course.
But
That's
I'm-
Island's neighborhood. That's your neighborhood there.
That's that neighborhood? Okay. Okay, good. All right, maybe you're right. Okay, but
Barrett?
down on your northeast corner, that's not all in the urban growth boundary, is it? They're right off Highlands and 101?
I mean, according to
John.
the information that we have, I'm sure Garrett could clarify it for us if there's any inaccuracy.
Okay, I was misreading, I keep looking at that map. I'm sorry about that.
It looks accurate to me.
Okay, it looks accurate to Jack. Forget I said anything. Go on, please.
No problem whatsoever. Yeah, and so I mentioned there are only 4 buildable lots that are larger than 5 acres. So while that 90 acres seems like a large number, it's important to note that, you know, it's not as much land as it seems. I'll also note that the state is currently going through a rulemaking process around housing, and one of the things that they're looking at is refining how buildable land inventories are conducted. Because the state's concerned as well that cities have what we would call a lot of paper capacity that isn't very realistic on the ground, and they're looking at changes that might help refine the process and get to a more accurate number. So that's it for the buildable land inventory. Next, the infrastructure needs inventory that we did, where we're looking to identify key capital improvements in current infrastructure plans that will help enable housing production on buildable lands. I'll mention that this part of the report for each of the communities was a little more challenging than the others, just because we did acquire, and I'll have a list of them. In fact, I'll just go to the next slide. So we based this information on the water system master plan, the water management and conservation plan, the transportation system plan, and the US 101 facility plan. And I'll just note that, you know, as we dug into these plans, it became clear that they're really written to assess the overall needs of the system and a growing population, but don't always look at kind of locationally where a city might be looking to grow specifically. And so our information isn't quite as detailed as we would hope. But we did identify some of the key infrastructure considerations and challenges, constraints for the city. Water rights or water supply and water supply resiliency. It was clear that was a concern. Understanding that a water treatment facility improvements or upgrades are needed in the future. There was mention of Highway 101 pipe replacement relative to that system. We talked to staff about wastewater resiliency, understanding that the city relies on septic, and that is a constraint to housing develop, you know, the amount and density of housing development. And then some of the environmental constraints that I mentioned earlier in terms a priority for the city we understand is tsunami evacuation routes and safety around Highway 101. So those were the key infrastructure challenges. And then looking at housing supply.
Can we pause for 1 second?
Sure.
Can we pause for 1 second? I know that we.
This is John speaking.
Okay.
Thank you. So, and I know that we don't have Garrett, we don't have Peter here with us today, but I know Peter, and I guess yourself, Chad, and maybe Garrett as well, have been working on concerns that the state has indicated that our growth is not as high as we think it is. I want to make sure we don't leave anything in writing which suggests that we agree with them. And this document that I'm looking at, I'm not sure it's different than this, but I think it's the document we're given that correlates with this. On page 1 says the city's population is projected to increase by 1.5% over the next 20 years. Is that our projection or the state projection we don't agree with?
That is the state projection that we don't agree with.
Can we somehow, I don't want this document to be somehow embedded in the record saying that we agree with this.
So Steve and Garrett, that is true. I didn't see that in this document earlier, and that's something that we're currently working with BSU also to appeal. And we're working on getting that information out. So, yeah, that's according to PSU, not to the city of Dearborn.
So maybe at the very least, we should clarify that that data is PSU data, not our data. And then one other, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We certainly can do that. And I just wanted to mention that, and maybe Alyssa can talk about this a little bit later. I think she may have joined us by phone, but you know, we're not asking the city to take any action on these reports that we prepared. It's really just information to aid, you know, you as you have conversations and continue work around housing going forward. But continue, please.
Understood. And then one other comment, and I'm done, is that on page 1 of this document, not your document, the document we were given, which is a written document, not a PowerPoint. It indicates that growth over the last 10 years was approximately 22.5%. On page 4, it says growth in the last 10 years was 40%. There's two different statements. It could be because of different starting and ending dates, but they both say the last 10 years.
I'm just looking at the document right now, so I'm not. I see the page, I see the figure on page 1. I'm not seeing where it says 40% on page 4.
Where it says future needs. The city has experienced an approximate 40% increase in population in the last 10 years.
Okay, I'll have to regroup on that, because I'm not seeing that on page 4 of the document that I have in front of me, which is the housing supply assessment. Is that the document you're looking at?
It's the Gear Infrastructure Summary Memo.
Oh, the infrastructure summary. So the information, the first piece of information that you mentioned is based on US Census. I'd have to go back and look and see what your infrastructure, the page 4, I can pull that up. Just give me 1 second. So page 4 is the water management and conservation plan, the Gearhart Water Management and Conservation Plan.
Correct.
I can take a look and see if they qualified kind of how they did their forecast. It's probably just different information and different data sources. It should be the same, right? Well, I should say it depends on when you're starting from for 10 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just think some additional clarity might be
Okay.
useful. The document is probably going to be in the record.
Understood. Thank you.
Following up with John, when we're back in the document titled Gearhart Housing Supply Assessment, where our population, we added 300 people in the 10 years between 2010 and 2020. And then the assumption will add another 500 people in the next 50 years. Is that
It's the PSU estimates.
Yeah, that's the Portland
50
State.
years? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where the problem is, obviously.
Are you feeling like that number is too low?
Well, yeah, I mean, in my head, if you had 300 people in 10 years, it would make sense that to only have 500 in the next 50 years, that, I don't know, our population is increasing more than that.
Yeah, and according to the census in 2024, we're I think 2,100 people. So that's we're gonna have to clarify a lot of that information, and you can work, Steve, Garrett, and I can work together with that, with Peter. But we are currently in the middle of a deal with the issue.
Okay. All right.
We also can take a closer look.
I had a question about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I read in the historian what the state's goals were for various cities and Clatsop County. And were any of those goals included in this?
Yes. I'm going to go over that. It's towards the end of our presentation and towards the end of the housing supply assessment memo.
Thank you.
And I'll also say it sounds like you've been in contact with Portland State University, but we can certainly help in terms of, or reach out to them in terms of better understanding the basis of their population forecast. But it sounds like that might be something you're already in the process of doing.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we've talked a little bit about population, so we know that the city's growing, and it sounds like has continued to grow over the last 5 years based on what I just heard a moment ago. So that's not news to you. We took a look at demographics of the different communities in Clatsop County. The population, demographic-wise, distribution is pretty similar to the county overall. About 28% of the population is retirement age, which tells us that, well, we look at demographics to try to determine what types of housing might be needed in each community. If we have an aging population, we want to be looking at senior housing and accessible housing, things like that. But also noted here that Gerhart has the second largest youth population in Clatsop County. So, housing for families with children is also a need and something to be thinking about. In terms of cost burden, so 86% of housing in Gerhart is owner occupied, and about 14% of homeowners are cost burdened. That's a definition that says that households are cost burdened if they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So about 14% of homeowners are cost burdened.
How's that data obtained?
I believe this is census data as well. I can take a look at the memo.
Why does it say Can Beach?
It's under renters, yeah, that's how it's cut.
That's just an error on my part when I was updating. I apologize.
All right, that's just.
I have a template for my presentations.
Okay, sorry.
I embarrassingly made a mistake. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
But the numbers I can assure you are for Gerhart. But 14% of housing in Gerhart is renter occupied, and about 63% of renters are cost burdened. So, that tells us that there's certainly something to look at in terms of more affordable rental housing for folks who can't afford to be homeowners. This table that we have looks at for renter households. It breaks renter households into income brackets. That's the green bars. How many households are at these renter households are at these different income brackets, and then looks at the purple bars. Look at the number of affordable units that are available at those different income brackets. So what we see is at this from 25,000 for households that make 25,000 to about $100,000 dollars per year. There is an abundance of renter households or of rental units available, but there's not units available at what these lower households can afford. So they're likely, again, these are those cost burdened households, right? They're paying more than that 30% or sometimes more than 50% of their income to afford some of these units that are more affordable to higher income brackets. And likewise, households at their higher income brackets are probably renting units that are well below that 30% of income that they can afford. Looking at housing vacancy, about 46% of housing units in Gerhart are vacant. That's about 675 units. That includes units that are for seasonal, recreational, or occasional use. And so of those 675 units, that's about 95% of those units are for seasonal, recreational, or occasional use. Only about 2.5% of vacant units are for sale or rent. So not a lot of opportunity for for homes to purchase or homes to rent. Looking at housing type that is available, the housing stock, We see that single-family detached units are the most common housing type. About 91% of the housing stock is single-family detached units. Middle housing, which we define as up to 4 units, represents about 4% of the housing stock. And then multifamily units, which is 5 units or more, make up about 4% of the housing stock, and mobile homes about 1%. And then we took a look at underserved populations. This says race, but we have a couple different items here. One is just noting that when we look at home ownership by race, about 93% of households are owned by white households, and about 46 all other races, which is about 7% of owned occupied units. The rate of residents with disabilities in Gearhart is 16%. That's lower than the county rate of 19%, but higher than the state. So again, thinking about what types of housing is needed, we need to be thinking about ADA compliant and universal design types of housing that people with disabilities can comfortably live in. And then you all may be aware that Clatsop County has the highest rate of houselessness per 1,000 residents compared to all other counties in Oregon, with 926 people counted. So again, other factors to consider when we're trying to look holistically at housing in Gearhart and in the county. So in terms of next steps, this was asked earlier. So under the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis process, the state now allocates 20-year housing allocations to each city in the state. I'll note that as a city with a population of less than 10,000, Gearhart is not currently required to meet their 20-year housing needs. So you don't have requirements about planning for future growth, at least from the state. Cities of more than 10,000 need to prepare housing plans and housing production strategies to show how they're going to encourage those units to be built. But anyway, the allocation for Gearhart, we see a 20-year allocation of about 382 units, and those are broken down by the different income brackets from 0 to 30% AMI, 83 units, 31 to 60%, 55 units, 61 to 80%, 21 units, and 134, and then 90 at those higher income brackets. And then finally, in terms of our next steps, we'd love to hear from you this evening and any thoughts or observations that you have. We're going to continue to work with staff over the next 1 to 2 months to refine and make sure that all the information we have is up to date and as accurate as possible. We're going to also work with staff to gather information from each community on what kind of housing related actions, if any, they've taken in recent years, because we want to, again, paint as complete a picture as we can about housing, so you have that information at your fingertips to continue conversations about housing in the future. And by the end of May, we will be delivering to each community a final report, which consists of those 3 memos that you have, but also an executive summary or a cover memo that'll be somewhere 5 to 10 pages that will not only summarize those 3 memos, but also our conversations with staff. When we met with staff, we took a closer look at potential buildable sites on the ground, and we are in the process of preparing some more detailed maps that show kind of opportunities and challenges in the community. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if that, Alyssa, is that you on the phone? If it is, I don't know if you want to say anything before we wrap up the presentation and open up for any questions and conversation. But I'm not seeing that phone unmute, so maybe it is not Alyssa. So happy to answer questions.
I have one question. If you could go back 1 slide in your presentation. This one, where does this come from, this production target? This is a state gives us these numbers, but we're not required to meet them. Is that what it is?
That is correct. And I have the source here. It's the Oregon Housing Needs. If you do a search on this online, Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Methodology Report. I believe it came out in December of 2024. That contains a lot of information on the methodology that the state uses to develop these allocations and includes the allocations. I think they allocate to the counties and then to the cities. I think Alyssa knows a little bit more about the details of how that works than I do at this point in time. Um, in the past, when we did housing work for cities, we would start with that Portland State University population forecast, and then we would work with cities to determine those housing allocations. But with the recent change in legislation now, the state allocates those to each city. They kind of do that work in place of what used to be done by each city.
I have a question.
Yes, Jennifer?
So my understanding from what you're saying is that tonight's presentation is informational for us. And the goal here is for your final report to be as accurate as possible and enable the Gearhart to be able to. Stop me, I'm summarizing. You said at the beginning, the goal is to justify, to be able to justify our housing decisions for zoning questions, to possibly amend our UGB plan, to advocate for infrastructure needs at the state level, and to look at workforce housing needs or housing needs on all income levels. So we're trying to optimize our town's ability to meet housing needs and get support from the state. That's my understanding what the goal here is, and is our role to give you feedback on these documents as best we know it, or what is our role here?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I would clarify just a bit to say that I think the purpose of our work, as requested by the county, and they got the grant from the state, was really to take a regional look at housing and not just a city by city specific. In Clatsop County, Astoria is the only city that's required to do any planning around housing, but we know that housing is not a local problem. It's a regional or local issue. It's a regional issue. And so what I believe the county wanted to do was provide information, up-to-date information for each city and the county overall. We also did a lot of work on the unincorporated, similar work for the unincorporated communities in Clatsop County, so that the housing task force and the county and each city has some up-to-date information that when you're having different conversations about housing, or to the extent that you want to look at planning for future population growth, you have, I don't know that it's to justify anything as much as it is to hopefully be a tool or an aid for you as you talk about, well, what really are the housing needs in our community, and what might it take to encourage or to be a catalyst for future housing development. I hope that answered your question.
I'm good.
Jennifer, I think that maybe to clarify that Peter, myself, Garrett, and then we'll work with Ms. Frost. We'll go over this data because we do not want this to multiply our issues moving forward. I mean, for example, the water rights discussion, if they're going to be, working off this data, housing data, that sort of thing, and then we have the incorrect PSU data in there, that's going to hurt that application. Future grants, as we write those grants. This also comes into revenue sharing from state revenue taxes that are coming in. That's one of the things that we're doing. So Peter is collecting this information, running the appeal, and then we'll go over this carefully because I do think it matters.
Yeah, okay, so it was my understanding that this documentation is something that was requested by the state and coordinated for the county and not originated with us.
It's a county it's originated with the county. The county requested the funds to do this project.
Yeah. Okay. Other Questions? Yes, Dawn?
I guess this question's for Chad, kind of talks in here about relationships and how the city can help facilitate, building on these 91 buildable acres around here. What does that look like? How does the city help builders and property owners create housing?
Well, I mean, zone changes, updating our zone codes to allow different types of developments potentially. Are two of the areas that I think would be most effective for Gerhart. We don't have a lot of land that is actually buildable. A lot of these pieces of property are being held generationally, not moving. Some, as you see in the map, they took out constrained in that, but with our growth and with the available land, and we know what the expense is to build and to buy in Gerhart. It feels like things are very, very tight to us, even though we don't have the requirement to do a study to necessarily for our 10 or for our 20-year supply. The state does require you to provide numbers that prove that you need it. So this data will go into that. How other ways for us to grow? Housing Matters has a really good presentation on some of the things that communities can do. And I think once these reports are a little bit better solidified, then you're going to have some options and some things recommended by Garrett and the staff on what we can do to provide for more housing. But we have some constraints here with septic systems and that's going to make it difficult for us. But I think that there might be some. Okay. Just not sure what those are.
The other question I have is I saw the updated Highway 101 plan. Which to me, we were talking about the goals list. That's like the goal list to me is getting this program going. So can you give us an update on how that's?
Yeah, a few months ago, we were notified that we were one of 4 projects in Oregon that were being funded for our transportation plan that we have there for the highway traffic diet reconfiguration. Unfortunately, due to COVID and the rise of expenses, the other 3 projects that were just above us, of the 4 that were allocated funds, came back and said we could no longer do these projects for the prices that we anticipated. So they deleted our project and gave our funds to the 3 top scorers, with the hopes that we'll continue to score well in future budget cycles. So that traffic diet reconfiguration is just waiting for some sort of funding because it's millions of dollars. Side note though, because of an ADA lawsuit against ODOT, we will be getting the reconfiguration job done on Pacific Way and 101 to make that intersection work better for ADA folks and people with disabilities to be able to cross the highway. So that's moving forward. But the other projects will just be waiting for funding. We'll continue to compete for those dollars.
So just because we were 4th and just finished out of the medals, does that not make us 1st now?
It depends on the projects during the next round. It's a competitive process. There's very few dollars, and as you've seen, with some of the things with the ODOT budget, they've had some challenges there. So I'm skeptical, and they also do their budgets for these types of projects every 4 years. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that you can consider for another 3 until we get there, and then I'm not sure what the other projects will be and how that's going.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, figures them out.
Yeah.
I think if we look at page 7 of 15, that first document, it talks about buildable lands in there. And there's just one big chunk there east of 101. But the rest of them, I think so many of those lots are held by families and have no intention of building anything. I know that like where I live, it says there's 8 lots, but 2 of those lots have been built on the last 2 years. So I know there's not that many, but the other ones are being held by families who go like, I have this lot, I want the lot next door for my kids to run around. They're not gonna build. Yes, Eric.
Well, it's even worse than that, because if you go forwards to page 11, which shows the map you were looking at, but with the constraints, that big green patch even gets diminished further.
It gets smaller.
So I wanted to just clarify with Chad, I would actually like to think that this was valuable information for the city to be able to see a map like this and the description of, there's 166 acres, but 133 of them are 0 to 1 acre lots and only 4 of them are greater than 5 acres. That delineation of inventory of land, we wouldn't have had that kind of discrete information without a project like this, would we not?
No, not necessarily. The group has been doing a really nice job of putting this information together. Yeah, there's a few things that we need to fix.
Right. But that seems like really helpful.
Kind of confirmed our feelings,
Right.
but other than that, no, it's been very valuable and the group has been doing a great job.
Right, so I think this actually, other than the questions we have about roads and that kind of thing, the actual inventory of land and constraints involved and such size, and affordability, I think this is very helpful information.
Yeah, and we had to ratify those maps. The first time the map came out, prior to this group working on it, we had to go out and ground truth it and we removed hundreds of lots. Well, maybe close to 100 lots that were already built upon, not buildable and that sort of thing, because I think the first attempt, they were just using satellite photography and some guesswork. Staff went around, we fixed that, they went ahead and amended their maps, and this one's pretty accurate. You'll see a large blob like on the Leaderhorn property as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
You know, and that's probably
They're not
not,
building a bunch more
they're
houses.
not gonna build a bunch more houses this year.
This one right here.
That's the only area that I was like, well, you know, how do we discuss that? And I said, well, it's possible, right? It's R1,
Yeah.
2,000 square foot lot.
Some person could inherit.
Suppose
that
anything's
someday.
possible. There weren't many other pieces like that, so we just kind of gave up on it.
This is the third housing trend buildable lot thing I've had since 2019. I'm going like, another version.
They're refining it every time.
Yeah, but it's still coming back to basically the same thing. There's not, no,
Not a lot that Gerard can do because of our circumstances, but I think there are a few opportunities.
oceans and mountains are kind of constrained, right? Anything else you want us to do?
No, I just appreciate, I mean, the reason we're presenting to you is so we can get this feedback. So thank you in advance for helping us to refine these documents. And in the end, you know, we want them to be useful to you. So we're here to continue to work back and forth until we get it into the state where it's going to be helpful to you going forward. So thanks again for your time, and thanks in advance for helping us finalize this information.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, Steve.
Moving forward, concerns of the commission, anything else tonight? We don't have the land use attorney, so we have no questions, so it is 7:35. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Garrett. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you.
John brings up that stuff and we got Canopy in the presentation, so.
Oh, no problem. You just make sure
It was like the bottom part, it was a congratulations typo. So Jenny.
Oh, that's been a while.
500 people are gonna move in 50
One other
years
quick thing.
I know.
because there's nowhere to go.
When you go down Pacific Way to
But
the
there's
beach
not gonna be any
entrance.
growth of families.
There's the beach entrance. Exactly.
But
The
okay,
level of mowing this
in
year
50 years,
seems
you're supposed to be
extreme.
2287.
Been done to
We're
the
like
left of the entrance. Is
20,
that unusual? Is that
2000,
something that is?
2100 at this point. So we're really only really got to add like another 150 people
Those are called the
in
PM.
the next 50 years.
Yeah,
And so,
you're right. Well, we doubled, it seemed like we doubled since I moved here right around 2000 to now. We were just under 1,000 in 2000 and now we're just under 2,000.